How's it going, everyone? Yosef back here with another video, and I hope you're having an amazing week so far. As promised, today is the third and final part of this series where I talk to you about my review of my 2023 Volkswagen Golf R. Today though, we're going to talk about the things that I don't like about the car. We spent the last two videos sort of putting it up on a pedestal, showing all the really amazing things about it. And today I wanted to sort of give you a bit of an objective view, kind of looking at it from the other side. What are some of the things that I don't really like about this car? So before we get into it, I wanted to just say this was not an easy thing for me to do. I was sitting down and, really trying to think about the things that I didn't like about it, and it was not the simplest thing in the world. But I've had the car now for about a year, and so I've got a pretty good idea of some of the things that I really like, some of the things that I wish were different in the car. And so today we're going to explore that. Are you ready? Let's go. All right, so the first thing that's a little frustrating with the 2023 Volkswagen Golf R is the lack of color options. Now, when you buy a car, usually you've got 4, 5, 6 different colors that you can choose from for the outside. Usually there are a couple different choices on the inside. With the Volkswagen Golf R, you don't have those options. There are 3 colors that you can choose from. We have this beautiful lapis blue color that I love. There's a white color and there's black, which is great, but it doesn't give you a lot of personality and a lot of different options to choose from. And the frustrating thing is, a couple years ago, they gave you some really great options for the Golf R. And they had this sort of awesome palette of over 30 different colors that you could choose from. And I was really hoping that they give us the opportunity to do that for the 2023 or the Mark 8 Golf R, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. So we only had 3 colors to choose from for the outside, and all of them got the exact same interior, whether you got the blue one, a black one, or the white one. So that is one thing that I wish they had done a little bit differently for the Golf R. The next thing that's a little frustrating about the 2023 Volkswagen Golf R is the door trim is a little different on the front than it is on the back. So if you take a look at the interior here, you'll see on the door card, you've got this beautiful carbon fiber that we talked about before. You've got this really nice sort of soft touch material at the top. But if you take a look at the back seats and the door trim here, well, it's not the same. There's no carbon fiber here, and this is scratchy plastic. So they cheapened out a little bit when it came to the back seat, and I kind of wish they had continued the carbon fiber and the nice soft touch material back here. It just would have completed the image of it both from the front and the back. The next thing that I wanted to mention is the sound system. Now we've got this Harman Kardon sound system, which sounds very premium and kind of looks awesome over here, but it doesn't sound as great as you'd expect. It's an upgrade to the sound system that comes with the base model Golf R, of course, or I should say the GTI, but you would expect a little bit more from a premium sound system for this car. And I was a little frustrated when I got in and heard it for the first time that it wasn't as good as I had initially expected. So it would have been nice if they gave us a bit more of a punchy system, but that's okay. I know there's a lot of aftermarket options that you can get. Just would have been nice to get that from the factory. Okay, so for the next thing that I didn't really love about the 2023 Volkswagen Golf R, I'm gonna have to bring us into the interior again. And we're gonna turn the car on because it'll be easier to show. So if we wanna change the climate control here and we wanna adjust it to be a little warmer, a little cooler, what ends up happening is you take your finger and press the sliders over here and you'll see the temperature is changing, but it's changing from my side only. It's not changing the passenger side, and that's a little frustrating. For me to be able to get them to go at the same time, I gotta click on that climate button, go back into the menu, hit sync, and now everything will sync. But if that sync function wasn't set up, then you're gonna be changing the temperatures individually for each zone. The nice thing though is that sync function also works for the rear. So you don't have to worry about changing the temperatures back there. If your kids are back there, they don't know how to play around with it, then you have the ability to hit that sync button. All of a sudden the rear is going to sync with you as well. And you can lock it, which is kind of neat. So I'm not a hater of all these slide sort of touch capacitive buttons. I think they're kind of cool and futuristic, but I think there's a case and a point for them. And it's not the best thing in the world for every function in the car. With climate control, I really would prefer if there was a bit of a knob or something that I could use just to make it a bit easier instead of having to go to different menus and play around with different features. That is one thing that I really like to play with on the go. Now I will mention one last thing about the climate control. You do have the voice activation here, so if you wanted to speak to the car and say, for example, that you're cold or you're hot, it'll know which seat you're saying that from, and it'll adjust accordingly. So there is a really nice workaround for it, and there is sort of that touch feature if you wanted to do the heated seats, but overall it would have been nice to have the sort of dials or something a little bit more unique for the climate controls. One company that I just want to shout out that does it really well, Jaguar Land Rover. They do some really cool stuff with their climate control buttons. Take a look at that. That would have been cool to have in this car, but I'll take what I can get. Okay, now on the topic of touch buttons, we have these sort of capacitive touch for the interior lighting, and they work sometimes. They don't always work, and that's something that I find to be a little frustrating. It would be nice if they worked all the time. You see here, that one turned off, I didn't touch it. This one I'm touching and it's not turning off. So, you know, it looks really cool and futuristic, but it doesn't always work the way that you would want it to. And that's something that can be frustrating at times. It would be nice if it worked all the time. Okay, the next feature that's kind of interesting that I don't really like is when I was driving over here to get to this location, I had it in race mode. But when I turn off the car and I turn it back on, it doesn't remember the mode that you're in. It automatically goes back into this sort of sport comfort mode, and that's a little frustrating. It would be nice if I got into the car, turned it on, and it remembered exactly the mode that I was in, and that way I'd be ready to just kind of go off and drive the way that I enjoy the car, instead of having to go into the menu again and change the setting that I wanted to, just to be able to drive the way that I want. Okay, another feature that I really don't like about this car, it's not a deal breaker, but it's something that kind of frustrates me. We're gonna get out of the car for this. I'm gonna close the door here and I'm gonna lock it. And most modern cars now, they have folding mirrors. This one doesn't. You lock the car and nothing happens. You have to manually fold in the mirrors, which again is not a big deal, but it's something that kind of frustrates me every once in a while. It's a premium car, and that's something that should come from the factory already installed. Now, the later models, from my understanding, do have the folding mirrors, and I do believe that the European models have the folding mirrors, but for whatever reason, the North American ones don't have it. Okay, so another interesting thing, this is a bit of a quirk, and take it for whatever value it is that you think. The taillights on the European model are just a little bit nicer, in my opinion, than the taillights that we get in North America. And the same thing goes for the headlights, although the look of them is going to be the same, just the functionality is a little bit different. So I wish there wasn't this differentiation between the European market and the North American market when it comes to the headlights and taillights. It would be really great to get the full sort of dark look on the taillights over here instead of having that sort of white piece over there for the turn signal. They also have the sweeping turn signals in Europe, which we don't have here, which would be really cool. It's an option that you can get from the dealer and then get it coated in, but it would be really nice to get that from the factory. All right, the next thing that frustrates me, and it's not a deal breaker, of course, but when you go to the passenger side and you open the car, you'll notice that there is only one power adjustment for the passenger seat. Now, it's not a big deal because, you know, for the most part, you set the passenger seat and you go, but it would be really nice if there was the option to have power or memory seats for the passenger seat in the front as well. You know, we have that on the driver's side and we've got some great lumbar support and all of that. We don't have that here on the passenger side, which is a little frustrating. And sometimes when I go with my wife, she says, well, the bucket seats are really nice, but there is no support for the lumbar. And it would be nice to be able to quickly move it backwards and forwards instead of having to reach for a latch and do it manually. Okay, the next thing that's a little frustrating for me is the gloss black material over here. Well, it scratches very, very easily. There's a lot of fingerprints. It looks very dusty. Now, I'm not opposed to having that plastic over there. I think it does look good in certain places, but you know, this is an area that gets, you know, dinged up pretty quickly. And I've only had the car for about a year now, and there are some visible scratches that I can see that sort of irritate me. I'm one of those people that likes perfection in a car, and unfortunately that's not something that you can achieve when you daily drive it and have a family. Some things you just got to give on. It's going to get damaged a little bit, but it would be nice if you had sort of something else that was a bit more robust there. And also, every time you take it to the dealer or anybody touches the car, there's always a risk of that part getting scratched. Now, on the outside of the car, the paint also happens to be very scratchable. Now, I think a lot of cars are susceptible to scratches pretty easily, but this one in particular, it gets the swirl marks super easily, and for me that's really frustrating. You know, you just kind of look at it the wrong way and it gets a swirl mark. And I know there's paint protection film that you can get that will just help prevent that, but it is very expensive to get a whole car PPF'd. At least for this car, I've taken a look at quotes and it's $5,000–6,000. It's a lot of money. And so not necessarily is that something that everybody's going to want to do, but I have seen cars that have a little bit thicker clear coat that sort of handles that a little bit better. So you don't have to worry about all the swirl marks and scratches super easily. All right, the other thing that is interesting is this car is a small car, but the turning radius is not as good as what you would expect from a car of this size. And that becomes apparent when you're parking or you're trying to make a U-turn or get out of a tight place. You would think that because it's a very small car that it would turn on a dime, but unfortunately it doesn't. And so that's something that you're going to have to put up with, being a bit of a sporty car and having those massive brakes and the bigger wheels. The turning radius is not going to be as small as you would expect from a tiny car. Okay, this next thing is going to be very difficult for me to demonstrate, so I'm just going to have to tell you about it and you'll have to believe me. With all of the safety features that come with this car, and they are plentiful. You've got all the backup sensors, you've got the camera, you've got loads of different things that help keep you safe, the lane keep assist, and you've got collision mitigation, and all of that really great stuff. The problem with it is you can't turn it off. And that's a little frustrating because it's very aggressive, and it doesn't let you necessarily change lanes if you're a little too close to the car next to you, or behind you I should say, even if you have enough room and you have the turn signal on. It decides for you whether you should or shouldn't make that lane change, and it resists, it fights you a little bit. But the part of it that really infuriates me, and this is something that bugs me every time I park the car, is when you're backing up, those sensors, they always think that you're going to have an accident with your garage. And so it violently slams on the brakes and it sort of lurches you forward. And it's just not comfortable. It's something that is very frustrating for me, and I wish there was a way that I could turn that off just for when I'm backing into my garage. I love to see where I am, so I want to have the camera feature, but it would be great if I could turn off the collision mitigation and those sensors so it wouldn't drive me crazy every time I'm trying to back into my garage and have it slam on the brakes for me. Okay, we're going to move back into the interior of the car for the next couple things. Now, one of the things that's sort of infuriating with this car, and for those of you that have had any other sort of family vehicle in the past, will know that most cars come with a sunglass holder up here. This one doesn't, and it was one of the things that I was just shocked about when I was learning about the car and looking at pictures. I was really frustrated to know that there wasn't a sunglass holder up there. Most cars have one, and there probably could be space if they wanted to, but there is a lot of technology up there, so I do understand why they didn't put it in, but it's something that frustrates me a little bit. Another thing that has to do with the interior of the car is you'll notice that, well, it's very dark. There's a lot of black. There is a lot of blue sort of peppered through the car, which is really cool. But for the most part, the seats are black. The center console is black. The steering wheel is black. The dashboard is black. The headliner is black. It's a very nice headliner, I have to say. I got to give them credit for that. Everything is very soft and it's a nice material and it does look very premium, but it's black. And you don't get any other options for maybe having the middle of the seats a different color or the headliner a different color. And you know, those are things that just kind of help give it a little personality. And if I hadn't put the yellow shift knob in there and had all the blue accents, I feel like it would have been a very dull interior. So it's nice that we have some contrast and the carbon fiber and some other things, but it is very dark. And I wish they had done something a little bit more creative with the interior to give you some more color choices and not have such a dark feeling space. Another thing that's sort of interesting, and people have told me I'm a little crazy for this, but it bothers me a little bit. My other car is a 2016 Mazda CX-9, and there is a button to hang up and accept a call on the steering wheel, and that way it makes it super easy. Somebody calls, you just pick it up by pressing a button on the steering wheel and you hang it up from there too. You don't have to go into the center screen to hang up a call or accept it. And that's something that I find to be a little frustrating. You get calls every once in a while when you're driving and it just takes your eyes off the road for a minute to have to go and look, oh, where's the call button or where's the accept button on the screen over there? And that's something that I wish they had integrated into the touch buttons on the steering wheel. I think it would have been a really welcome change and a nice addition to those touch sensitive buttons. Another thing that's kind of interesting about this car is there is no surround view camera. Now I'm going to turn the car back on for you so you can see this, but it's got a really great backup camera. Don't get me wrong, I am not complaining about that. But at a car at this price, 2023, it would be really nice to have a full surround view camera instead of just a backup one. And the backup one is really great. There's a lot of resolution, we've got all the sensors, it's really nice, but it would be great to have that surround view camera just to help with the parking and make sure that we're not curbing those wheels. Another thing that's a little frustrating with this car is there's only one cup holder. Now it's a cool cup holder. If you press the button, you get that piece that sticks out and it sort of wraps around whatever drink you have in there, but there's only one. What about the person that is sitting next to you? And to be honest with you, this cup holder is not great for taller objects. If you had a small cup in there, a little cup of coffee would probably hold it relatively well, but you know, it's not great. It's not flimsy by any means in terms of the mechanism here. This is pretty solid, but it doesn't do a great job. And I kind of wish there was a second cup holder that would allow you to have two proper sized cups in here so that your passenger can also have a space to put their stuff. Okay, another thing that's a little frustrating, we're going to go back outside of the car for this, is the tailgate is quite heavy. And that's not really an issue for most people, and it's not really an issue for most cars, but the reason why it's a problem with this one is the struts that hold it up are not the strongest for the weight of this tailgate. So, you know, I'm holding the tailgate about here, and if I just let go, it's going to shut. So if I'm carrying something heavy, or bags of groceries, things like that, I'm going to have to go and actually really lift it up and hold it a lot higher for it to open properly. And that to me is a little bit frustrating. It would be nice if the struts were a little more powerful, so you just kind of pull it and it lifts all the way up, or at least have a power tailgate. There are a lot of cars in this segment, well, I should say SUVs, that are around the same size that have power tailgates. It would be nice to have a power tailgate at this price point, and if not, just to have slightly stronger struts to lift up the trunk. And I think that's something that's unique for this particular car because, you know, we've got this really nice big spoiler, which I absolutely love. And I wouldn't trade that up for a trunk that lifts up a little bit easier, but it's just something to know about. Okay, so one thing that's a little frustrating about that very trick and awesome tailgate opener is that the backup camera is sort of embedded within it. And the reason why that's sort of good and not good is, well, it keeps it very clean, which is very nice. You never have to worry about it getting dirty because it's hidden under there. But the part that's a little frustrating with it is when I put the car in reverse and then I want to, let's say, open the trunk. I'm in a hurry now, I've put the car in reverse and I want to quickly go and get something out of the trunk. Well, I can't open it because the camera's in there. So there's no way to open the trunk when the camera is visible. So now what I need to do is run back into the car and press this little X button over here. And you'll see that's gonna hide the camera away. And now I have the ability to go in and open the trunk. But before I do that, I can't. So if you're in a bit of a hurry or the car's in reverse, there's no way to access the trunk. You have to sort of turn off the backup camera, or you have to turn off the car and let it sort of sit for a second, and then it turns that camera back off and it hides it into its place, and then you have the ability to go in and actually open the trunk. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to talk about is the fact that, well, this is the 20th anniversary model, and that's special. You know, they didn't make a lot of them. There's supposed to be only 500 of them in Canada, I believe 1,600 or 1,800 for the world, which is kind of cool and unique. There aren't a lot of ways to differentiate this particular 20th anniversary Golf R from the regular Golf Rs. Now there are a few notable things. You'll see I've changed back over to my summer tires, and these black Estoril rims are one of the ways that you can distinguish between a regular Golf R and a 20th anniversary model. The regular one has sort of silver painted over here instead of black. We also have the black mirror caps, which are really nice and a bit dirty, so please excuse that. The regular Golf R has sort of these brushed aluminum ones, which are also really nice and fancy, but this one is sort of blacked out. And on the interior, we've got the carbon fiber trim. Although now you can get it on the 2024 models as an option for the regular models. You don't have to get a 20th anniversary model. And then the other thing that you can see, which is very small, is a little 20 badge right over here on the B pillar, which is nice, but it's not really something that you can see very quickly or easily when you're looking at it. It doesn't really differentiate it all that much. And apart from that, the R20 that sort of projects down from the mirror is one way to look at it, but there aren't a lot of things that really make it stand out as something unique. It would be great if there was a little plaque inside the car or something that said, you know, this is a special edition. This is something that is really special, other than those few little cosmetic details. Now, there are a couple others that are worth mentioning. Those R logos around the car are blue here instead of silver as well. That's something that's unique to the 20th anniversary model, but you know, it doesn't really stand out that much. And I feel like when you're paying extra for a special edition, it would be nice to have something that just makes it stand out a little bit more, or at least tells people, look, this is a unique Golf R. It's not just a regular standard one. And that's something that I would have loved to see for this 20th anniversary model. You join me again inside the Golf R for another night drive, just so that we can sum up the video and everything that we've talked about today. We've covered a lot, and there's just a few things that I wanted to sum up kind of in a different environment. So let's go for a drive so we can talk about it. So we've talked quite a bit about some of the things that I really don't like about this car. Now it's funny because when I started putting together my notes for what I wanted to talk about, I thought there's no way I'm going to have more than one or two things, but you know, after I started putting pen to paper, I realized, you know, there are quite a few things that kind of frustrate me or bother me about this car. And it took me a while to really get all the notes that I wanted, but I think after I went through that exercise of really thinking about the things that sort of really frustrate me or drive me crazy about it, it really helps prove the point that I made in the last video. That is, there is no such thing as the perfect car. And I think it's important with every decision that you make that you really think through all of the pros and the cons and the challenges that you might have with it. You know, you really should get to know your decision inside and out, especially if it's a big one. Especially for something like a car or a house, or, you know, something that you can't change or go back to really easily. And so it's funny because after I took a look at this car and all the really great things about it, you know, it started to give me a sense of, well, there's a few ways that Volkswagen has really cut a lot of costs here with the, you know, back seat area not being the same materials as they are in the front, and, you know, the door cars not being the same, and the fact that they don't have these aluminum door sills, which is, you know, kind of a cheap feeling thing. But that's just part of it. And, you know, when I got the car, I had to do a lot of research trying to think about, is this really the car that I want? And what are some of the challenges that people have had with the old generation? And what are some of the things that people are anticipating will be challenges for this generation? And so it gave me a lot of time to think about if this is the car that I really want. And luckily for me, I had 2 years to wait until I got the car actually coming in. I was on a waiting list. I put in an order for this car and I had to wait for 2 years for it to come. And in those 2 years, it really gave me a lot of time to sit and think about, you know, is this really something that I still want? And every day I woke up thinking, man, I wish the car came today. I wish I had it so I could enjoy it and really drive it. And that to me was sort of the way that I knew that this was the car that I really, really wanted. And so I think there's an important life lesson here. You know, with everything in life, there are the positives, the negatives, the benefits, the drawbacks. There's always going to be some sort of opportunity cost. And I think it's really important to be aware of, again, the good things, the things that maybe aren't so great, the positive, the negatives. And if you're okay with them, and if you're okay with the positives sort of outweighing the negatives, then you know that you're making the right decision. But if you're not aware of all those things, then it's really hard to make an educated decision about what it is that you're trying to make a decision about. And so I think as a life lesson, it's really important. And it's something that I think everybody should be thinking about when they're making their important decisions. Talk to people who have done whatever it is that you are wanting to do before. try to get as much research in as possible for all the things that may come up that you would otherwise not think about. That's the stuff that you really want to know about before you get into it. Before I end off, I really do love this car. It's super exciting. It's a fun car to drive. It's luxurious. It's really awesome. But I'm really glad that I had the time to really sit and think through the benefits and the drawbacks, the things that I don't really like about it, so that I can really appreciate the things that I do love. And that to me is so important. So the last point that I wanted to make about this particular car is, this is a relatively early model. Now the Mark 8, this is the 8th generation of the Volkswagen Golf R. It came out in 2022, and I got my car July of 2023. So what that means is, it's a relatively early production model that I got. And with anything that's relatively early in its production cycle, there are always going to be some things that, the company hasn't really thought about or hasn't perfected yet. And it's the same thing with Volkswagen. I knew going into it, there are going to be some challenges with this car. Not everything is going to be perfect and seamless. And I was right about that. This week, oddly enough, I turned the car on once and everything went crazy. All the lights were going on and flashing, and the infotainment was doing all this crazy stuff. It was calling roadside assistance. It was doing a lot of things that were really, really, really frustrating. And that's just something that you have to put up with. If you get something that's been on the market for a few years, the company's already had time to test everything, get all the bugs and the quirks and the challenges sorted out, but they didn't yet, because this is a relatively early production car. And it's something that I knew I was getting into and I was prepared for. And thank God this isn't my only car. I have another one, so if things fail and I can't drive it, I still have something that I can default to, I can use as a backup. So for me, it's not detrimental. But if it's your only car, you need to be aware of that. It's something that you should consider. Maybe you don't want to get the first generation, the first model year of a new generation or a new body style or a really big refresh that's happened for a car. You may want to wait a little bit until all those challenges and quirks are worked out. But I didn't. And so I've had to deal with a lot of that infotainment challenge and the touch sensitive buttons and things going a little haywire. I've even had issues getting into the car, which is kind of weird. You have the proximity key and there's sensors on the door and it knows that you're coming up, and you put your hand in the door handle and it unlocks the car. And there are times where I do that and it doesn't. For whatever reason, it won't unlock, and then I have to pull the key out of my pocket and unlock the car that way. So, these are just things that you have to put up with. And again, it's something that I was aware of and I knew was a potential for being a challenge and a frustration. And I signed up for it. That's what I got with this car. And so I think it's really important to consider that with any car that you're looking to buy. Know if it's just been refreshed, if there's a lot of new technology that hasn't had time to really be tested thoroughly first. And is that something that you're willing to put up with, that frustration? Or, maybe you wait a year or two, let all those bugs and kinks get worked out, and then go get the car. Anyways, those are my thoughts. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks again for coming for another night drive with me. I really appreciate it. For me, it's something that I really enjoy, and I love to be able to share with you guys. If you have any cool thoughts or comments about what we've talked about today, let me know. I'm curious to get your feedback. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and catch you again in the next video.